That's good. And now I hear the escalator is being turned off. So now we'll definitely start again. So, okay, before I introduce our featured poets, please remember that we are still inviting both our live and live streamed audiences, that's you, Zoom people, to write poems in response to the poetry of our featured poets. A call for submissions has opened, and we'll be selecting poetry for a forthcoming anthology of response poem. You can read all about that on our website that you should visit occasionally anyway. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to our newsletter. Okay, so now we'll come to the featured readers of tonight, and I'll start with Kegan over here. So Kegan McFadden is a writer, curator, and visual artist who has been an active contributor to the arts in Canada for 2 decades. Kegan's poems have appeared in GEIST. That's still one of my favorite magazines because it's a German word, and Geist is one of those really intranslatable words. You know, it means ghost, spirit, mind, all those things, Geist. That's where his poetry has appeared. That says a lot. Also in Poetry is Dead, LemonHound Review, Front Magazine, and CV2, where, along with Clarise Foster, he co-edited the Poetics of Queer. He's originally from Treaty 1 territory, aka Winnipeg, and has been living within the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples since 2017, where he's the executive director of the Victoria Arts Council and has contributed to various boards in a volunteer capacity, including Victoria Festival of Authors. He brought his chapbook at 6s and 7s tonight, and I'm very happy to give you now Kegan McFadden. Please give it up for him.
What a nice reception. I'm taller.
Yeah, you're taller.
Somehow wider on screen. Okay, that's great.
Okay, maybe the mic needs to.
Thank you so much, all the volunteers making this evening possible. Thank you to Kieran and the team at Planet Earth Poetry for inviting me. And thank you to the earlier readers, as well as my co-featured reader, Cynthia, in advance. So I was here last week. I don't come every week, but I was here last week to hear Wade Compton, and it was so great. Wade almost ended his set talking about Jack Spicer, and I'm going to start by talking about Jack Spicer. Hey, okay, huge fans. Oh, I should say, okay, so at 6s and 7s, it's a chapbook that I put out last year, all about being 42 years old, because everyone is like, oh, 30, 50, 100, 42. So it's in a few sections, and this is from section 2, which is called I'm Thinking That a Poem Could Go On Forever. And it starts like this. I'm thinking that a poem could go on forever. When I read Jack Spicer's line, I am thinking that a poem could go on forever. I remember your smile as you climbed over a diminutive cliff next to the beach, signaling me to follow with my back to the ocean, and how you showed me the creek. And there we hopped puddles and leaped rock to rock until under the overpass with the roaring trucks heading north on the highway and the surfers heading south, and the graffiti of lovers and parties, an archive whose lines too are endless. And it wasn't even lunch yet. We're early in our poem, but I suppose it could just as easily as walking the beach, as climbing a cliff, as hopping puddles, as leaping rock to rock, as business goes one way and leisure the other, as lovers have always left their marks, go on forever. Birthday poem for Dylan. I took for granted so many birthdays, but I remember clearly the cake you baked for my 42nd. Halfway through it all, I was just discovering how delicious life with you would be. So sappy. What we remember. In their old apartment on Wardlaw in the village, Doug and Larry told me about the time Susan recalled waking up one day and knowing she was no longer a babe. What cruel cognition. And 20 years later, I do the math quickly and maybe imprecisely and figure with certainty that I am now older than she was when she became a former babe. And yes, things are different for women. And yes, things are different too for gay men. And yes, I am 42 now, but I still remember my favorite Leonard Cohen line. I'm an old scholar, better looking now than when I was younger. That's what sitting on your ass does to your face. Like, the biggest laugh is not for me, but okay, great. One of only a few memories I have of all of us together, my family that is, was when my dad turned 42 and we were teasing him about his gray mustache that he'd been sporting forever and how old it made him look. Without warning, as I recall, he left my mother and my brothers and me in the living room, only to reemerge sometime later, clean shaven. I was 10 going on 11, and I thought, this is what men do. They surprise you. Section 3 of the book is called News Suite. And I guess, when you become middle-aged, you like really start listening to the news. I didn't do it for like 40 years. So, and then the news this last year was just awful. So this poem, the title is redacted, like actually blacked out. I wake up to hear that 25-year-old American airman Aaron Bushnell died from self-immolation yesterday. He recorded himself in uniform, walking with purpose, carrying a thermos whose lid was not present. I will no longer be complicit in genocide, he said into the camera of his cell phone, before dousing himself with gasoline from the thermos in front of the Embassy of Israel in Washington, D.C. Setting himself aflame, protesting "Free Palestine" over and over until he couldn't. The responders to the scene drew their weapons before attempting to extinguish the fire, engulfing the young man. The 3-minute and 11-second video ends with the voice of a man asking, "What is this? Who is this?" And a few months later, as the death toll climbed to 38,000, Felix Gonzalez Torres's untitled America No. 3 from 1992 sold for a record $13.63 million at auction. Composed of 42 light bulbs, porcelain light sockets, an electrical cord length of 504 inches, with the instructions to replace any burnt-out bulbs immediately. A warm glow that defies death, extends life infinitely, illuminating the dark as much and for as long as possible. The opposite of an airstrike. Another News Suite poem. I couldn't believe CBC listed these stories back to back one morning. It's called 17. To Nahil and Connor. Listening to CBC radio on the Start again. Listening to CBC radio report on the protests in Paris after police shot and killed a 17-year-old brown boy, Nahil, following a supposed traffic violation. Then hearing that a 17-year-old boy, Connor Bedard, was the NHL's first draft pick overall and that he is expected to start with the Chicago Blackhawks this fall, praised for his unpredictability on the ice. I slip into a moment where lights in the rear view are mirrored by flashing cameras at a press conference. How you both kissed your moms goodbye and then it all changed. How you went to bed the night before thinking about nothing and everything and all that falls between. How you went to bed thinking about everything and nothing. You both kissed your moms goodbye, then it all changed. Flashbulbs in a press conference are mirrored by lights in the rear view. Praised for his unpredictability, a 17-year-old white boy, Connor, is the NHL's first draft pick and is expected to start with the Chicago Blackhawks this fall. Protests in Paris after police shot and killed Nahil Barzouk, a 17-year-old boy, following a supposed traffic violation. 2. I am a trained art historian. It's a badge I wear reluctantly. So whenever there's a news item dovetails with art, and in particular when a very important artist dies, I pay attention. And so This is called Double Mirage after Sam Gilliam from 1932 until 2022, upon misreading his title Double Merge. At the nude beach, I did not swim out to the small island. Feeling the cool water on my sun-pink skin was all I wanted yesterday. On the shore, I did not follow the handsome young man into the forest that breaches the beach. Feeling the sand clump and dry on my feet between my toes before falling into the tassels along the edge of the striped blanket was all I wanted yesterday. This morning I read Sam Gilliam died, and I wonder if there isn't a mirage of me that made it out to that island, or that followed that guy, or that is still dancing an endless Saturday night. I wonder how long my body could hold out, clinging to my dance floor companion, some lost boy rolling in this sea of sweaty men. Two carousels, each one a curtain being pulled to expose another reality, unencumbered by the restrictive frames. The sunrise is just one side of the canvas to explore. And later in Palm Springs for Rob's 40th, I spend a long while taking in Gilliam's Indigo Danced from 1984. Its fractured collage surface, an assemblage, jagged and curved, green and pink, so much richer than my sunburnt skin, closer to purple really, almost orange, black, all shimmering and slight. At its apex rests a solitary yellowish gold bracelet I immediately mistake for a cock ring, or maybe the sun's eclipse. I Google 7-year life cycle, and I'm reminded it's simply your age every 7 years, such as age 7, age 14, age 21, age 28, and so on. Every 7 years, Google says, your life shifts in a major way. Recognizing a significant spiritual shift within your 7-year cycle involves tuning into subtle yet powerful signals that may manifest in various aspects of your life. Of course, the example given doesn't quite make it to 42, but here I am nonetheless, approaching my 7th life cycle, and I attempt to connect meaning in misreading a headline, laying on a beach, and slutty daydreams of a reluctant art historian. What is it called when a mirage is multiplied by 7? An exhibition. The back of this chapbook has an index, which is kind of fun, or like I called it notes. But I keep dropping all these names and whatever else references, and so the notes section is kind of fun. And this was written after coffee with John Barton, and it's called 23. Rare cancer seen in 41 homosexuals. The New York Times headline, dated 3rd of July, 1981, described the sudden appearance in gay men from New York and Los Angeles of a rare skin cancer called Kaposi sarcoma. Over coffee with John, I mentioned that a young man, a 23-year-old, was very eager to meet me, and I paused before clarifying. When I was his age, there was no one my age around. John closes his eyes, and all of his dead friends who would have been my age 20 years ago blur together. And the last project Michael worked on before his death in 2022 at the age of 80 was an artist book I published of his drawings he had made while living in Berlin 4 decades earlier, when he was my age, when John's friends were dying, while a whole generation was becoming ghost. I pull my pale blue and white striped t-shirt on this morning and remember wearing it one of the last times I saw Michael. And through his macular degeneration, he smiled at how young and gorgeous he found me. In the mid-80s, his flat had a shower, and before the wall came down, all of these soldiers found their way through his open door, and likely some of them became models, and almost certainly many of them died. And of course, some of them were 23. July 3rd, 1981, I was 3 weeks old, and my mother was newly terrified for her baby boy, intuitively knowing the world would afford me less than my brothers. The last poem in this sequence is also published in the current issue of CV2 magazine, which is their 50th anniversary issue. So it's kind of nice to be part of that. And I think about birthdays and this book is sort of about living and dying. And so I proposed this work that was accepted, and it's called Ain't Nothin'. And it's a found poem of top-rated songs by Elvis Presley, according to Billboard, upon learning that he died at the age of 42. Always on my mind, for the heart, moody, blues, US mail, bossa, Nova baby way down, good luck, charm, my boy, return, to sender separate, ways in the ghetto a little less, conversation fever, it's midnight stuck, on you if I can dream she's not your steamroller, blues, Kentucky, rain suspicious, mine's little sister too much don't cry, daddy crying in the chapel hard, headed woman, guitar, man, hound dog, one night memories, blue suede, shoes burning, love, love, me tender are you, lonesome tonight, let me be your teddy bear heartbreak hotel, can't help falling, in love, don't be cruel, it's now or never jailhouse, rock all shook up, that's all, right, don't. And the last poem I'll read tonight, I think we've got time for one more, right? Okay. Christine in the back with emphatic thumbs up. So this was written after the book was published, but it could just as easily go in there, I think. This is not a poem about the weather for Rachel. But isn't every poem about the weather? Or about love, or grief? On the morning you told me your mom died the night before, it was cloudy all day on the coast and into the next. When you and I first met 27 years ago, it was one of those warm September days in Winnipeg, and warmer still because we were 27 years younger and in love with poems about love, grief, and the weather. And you've been sitting Shiva, and I've been watching the skies. Last night, I saw the Big Dipper for the first time in a while, and I was surprised. Oh, there's the Big Dipper, I said, like I spotted a friend at the grocery store after too long. This sad club of poets mourning our mothers is innumerable. Count us 27 at a time, but you won't run out of weather, grief, or love. And the last time I saw your mom was in a little grocer in my old neighborhood. She was picking up a few more ingredients for a family dinner. It was December then, like it is again, and I remember thinking how long her hair had grown, and beautifully gray silver too, 2 decades since I first met her. We both love when the morning sky is soft pink, like it is today where I am, and maybe where you are too. Maybe we learned that from our moms, pregnant one December after the other in the early 1980s, looking upward with us in their wombs before they taught us about weather, about love, and about grief. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kegan. One more round of applause, please. Well deserved. Now that you know, you get a lot of heart icons here also on the Zoom and thumbs up and all that. Oh my God, yeah. Sorry. I turned 42 this October.
I've got a book for you.
I have a new life goal now, outliving Elvis. I was not aware of that. My wife was born on the day Elvis died. We'll have to do some special celebrations on various days this year. Toy. Okay. Okay, now we come to the last, but certainly not least part of the evening. We will now hear from Cynthia Woodman Kerkham. Let me read you and her, also her bio. She's not impressed by that. She knows her bio, right? But you might be, because she has published widely in literary journals across both Canada and the US. She's the winner of the John Land Poetry Prose Award, of the Malahide Review Award, the Federation of BC Writers Contest, and was one of the top 5 finalists in the CBC Poetry Prize. She's also the co-editor of the anthology Poems from Planet Earth. That sounds familiar. Right? And the author of 3 collections, which you all brought there, With Feathers, Good Holding Ground, and the new one, Water Quality, which is what she will exclusively read from. That's what she told me tonight. She lives in Victoria, BC, on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, where she teaches, edits, and serves on the board of the Victoria Festival of Authors. Cynthia, please read to us.
My pleasure. Thank you. And can you see my nose hairs on the Zoom? Good.
Looks good.
Good. Okay. So I think that's good. Yes, sound good. Yes, Christine in the back. Thank you. You're our anchor. So here it is. Water quality has a frog on the front. I just want to say for the record, this is not an American bullfrog, just so you know. It's a different. There is a poem about American bullfrog in here. I'm not going to read that tonight, but the book's in 4 sections, and the first section is called Fork Lake, and that's a section of. Actually, before I talk about that, I was just going to talk about the book as a whole. There's lots of different forms in it. There's haibun and sonnet and free verse, pantoums. But what connects them all is the motif of water. Water runs through every poem in the book. The first section, Fork Lake, kind of anchors the book in some ways, or that's what sort of started me on this journey of research about water. Fork Lake is a small lake up in the Highland area, and I have a long relationship with the lake. My mother-in-law bought a piece of property up there in 1952, and I've been going up there since the 80s and watching how people have taken care of or not taken care of that lake. We have a cabin there that has no electricity, no running water, an outhouse. We don't live there full time. Now it's built up all the way around with people who do live there full time. And so the lake has become the commons where people have to negotiate to figure out how to share it. And so with that comes a whole bunch of issues around stewardship and trying to track the consequences of your actions and so forth. So we're all involved in that. And what I noticed is that there's 2 kinds of people in the stewardship debate often, the guardian or the gardener. And the gardener wants to get in there and fix things, and the guardian wants to wait and watch and maybe get in there. So that first section goes between those 2 ways of approaching stewardship. The first poem is called Water Quality, and it goes back and forth between the science of testing the water and swimming in it, and the love of the place, which is sort of the base of stewardship always, I think, is love of place. Water quality. She bends to the service of water, lowers a Secchi disc until its white disappears, notes the depth again and again, reading turbidity. April, and she wears a short wetsuit, belly and chest warmed. She ducks her head, thrill of cold zippers her spine. Feeder Creek and spring-fed this lake, gouged by glaciers. 18 homes now people its patient shore, its shared front yard, no space for more. Water gloves her body in late June. Satin, yes, viscous, albumin, vernix, newborn slick. Tests wash light on columns of lake, measure algae haze, weed, Secchi disc dipped below the surface spins from glass to gray to gone, speechless water speaking. Sweet water, not leaf, not stone, but soft rain, soft, something to husband. The samples say this water's pretty good. Phosphates, nitrates at acceptable levels, coliforms and aquatic flora, pondweed and long-stemmed water shield, a titch up. July dusk and spent midges fleck the top inch. Breaststroke is parting curtains of small beads. Suckled on lead of city taps, some friends won't swim. They balk at bugs, at trout and bottom mud. Fly corpses sink, swallowed by cutthroats, dive deep to spring source, sluice. Some prefer a pool in blue tile where chlorine nibbles layers of protein from the skin. Late August night, naked, full-mooned, her body swims inside a blood-warm caress, mammalian hug, rolling in mink. This place she's lived 50 years, she is water strider, light prints, a whisper of strokes. Fall, and the shy garter pops its periscopic head, rare glide along a velvet floss of lake. Dereliction, 1908. The lake named for the fork, the way water branched west, cradled marsh, mallard, mink. Farmer Gregory, the first settler, sliding his skiff along lake bends, pulling on parallel oars as mist lifted from fern, rush, sedge. And at night, skimming his palm along his wife's hip. Gregory claiming the lake so fully he felt he could undo it, could blast and dig for 2 years, a wide trench to siphon water downstream, drop the lake level by 10 feet, creating pasture for his sheep. Call it dereliction, a recession of water leaving dry land. Call it settler spirit. Call it Fork Lake unforked, and at night with his wife, rivulet of seed. The next section, the second section in the book, is called Fragrant Harbor, which is the English translation of Shangang, which is the name for Hong Kong. And I grew up there from age 7 to 14, talking about your 7-year bits. And my father was transferred over there with Canadian Pacific Airlines. So we went from Willowdale to a suburb of Toronto to Hong Kong. So these poems have culture shock, transition shock, and they look at colonialism and class, some often through the eyes of a child. And then also in the section are poems from 2017 when I went back, and poems where I riff off Chinese poets because I studied Chinese literature when I got back here. So the first poem is called, in this section, is called Sampan 1962. This is not a sampan, it's a lullaby. Liquid songline in a viscous sea, thick with children, jellyfish boys, floating pale in warm moonlight, bathing after a hot day, hawking plastic shoes. This is not a boat, it's a woman, bare feet, deck wedded, chest hard pressed into mahogany hands as she grips a long sculling pole, rolls her burnished wrists. Tonight she's steering for the floating palace, restaurant pearled in strings of light. Tanks of live fish, grouper, black bass, small sharks prized for their fins. Tonka rower plying these waters that bear British names, Aberdeen, Stanley, Repulse Bay. This passenger is not a little girl. She is a broth steeped in the tang of otherness. Her expat family does not think they are wealthy. The Tonka rower knows they are. The girl, swaying to the stern, asks if she can pole, carve luminous the Black Sea. And the boatwoman allows, clowns with such plumpness, flashes a gap-toothed grin. These gaps much larger than the girl imagines. The next section in the book is called Gene Pool. So that is water in the shape of family. And the poem I'm going to read is called Burnt Pot Riverbank, Indifferent Sky. It was written over years of taking care of my aunt. It's a long one, so please hang in there. Burnt Pot Riverbank, Indifferent Sky. Liz, next door to my old aunt, phones and says Aunt Claire gets lost, drives through red lights, burns pots. That first night I arrive, her house far from town, my aunt thinks the best way to shut me up on care homes is to state plain in words of one syllable what she wants. She's a wild goat, my childless aunt, coarse salt and silver wire hair, invisible horns, saddling a face, braving confusion squall, insisting on her moon life, monastic home far from town, on the sage banks of a wide flood full of the snow's melt. She pats her black and white cat, who is so fat his gut strokes the floor, says, I want to die here with Bear. That's what I want, she says, even though they say I can't drive, nor tell time, nor thread a maze on that dumb test they gave me. I'll try and make it so, I say, I'll try. Fall, and we stroll the riverbank to view stunned salmon clotting the shores, their rock-flensed flesh in patches. White head dipped in winter light, she jams shapes into a jigsaw puzzle. The small pieces are difficult to fit, but nothing, she says, a hammer won't fix. Some days we pick plums from her trees, pesky mushrooms from her matted lawn. She taught me to swim in Shuswap Lake, Auntie who asks me every week where I'm calling from, who says, I'm afraid I'll forget who you are. Her hands below my spine, holding me in the lake, swirling loose limbs, making water friendly. Ruminant icon of my mother, their wild dove days, her wild pear heart, stone still over a child's shape-shifting puzzle. Ghosts of oil lamps, sometimes honeysuckle, sometimes braided rug, unwoven mind butting against small bridges, the always river she's lived beside. Walking the river beneath Russian olive trees, we greet a warden repairing a tumbled bridge. Aunt bends to mud, lugging boulders to help. Lure of activity always pulling. She grunts, heaves chunks of rock into the wire mesh frame he's built to patch the small bridge. My skeletal aunt deep knees another stone into the scaffold, absurd hold against an always crumbling bank. I'm afraid I'll forget who you are, she says, but we won't forget you, I reply. Where do you live, she asks, and I tell her, ask about the birds she feeds with suet. You live in the moment, I say. You're becoming a Buddhist. Yeah, she laughs. That's it. Her run not yet up, she scorns the bleached bones of depleted salmon. And I wonder, why not, mud-caked and struggling, die hefting your fateful boulder toward an indifferent sky? Where are you calling from? And every time the answer is the same. From far away, from further away. Each time I call as she sinks deeper and deeper, and I have no hands to hold her. The name of her dead husband, my name, fallen Russian olives, ruined plums. That one's always a bit hard to read, I have to say. Granddaughter in another city. If I were to write about you, I'd say longing, palpable as water. Since you were born, something weighty as the family lab, thudding a welcome into my thigh. I would tell you how we waited for you to travel like starlight from the amniotic sky. If I were to say completion, I might come near to how you snug into my enrobed chest, my heritage apple breasts remembering. If surprise at how my veins sizzled when I saw your photograph today, virtual you smiling, crackling air, the ocean between us. And I think, yeah, that's about right. I'm going to finish on a poem. I don't think there's much to say except it's called What Does Water Want? Bowed as a prayer in a bay, sun sheening its back, water slow heaves, breeze wishes. We swim Pendrell Sound, Melanie Cove, where island enclosed ocean rises and falls, tidal as lungs. We kayak, cupped red leaf on Black Lake, once logged. Hemlock spurs rot below, feed a patient hunger. What does water want? So little it shares another's color. Evergreen, emerald, algae, rust, the turquoise of silt. We fished a river, caught cutthroat for dinner, where stream-flushed granite poured into spangled sunset. We bathed naked, soapless and laughing, drank its cold and left. Late fall and rain plays games of silver jacks on a pewter sea, pummels clean a brine-drenched bow. Winter water wants to soak down slow, the sea asleep under rain's silky pelt, peopleless, days, months of this hiss, softness, breaking cliffs. Thank you very much.